Have you ever walked away from a conversation and thought, wait, that was really awkward? Or someone's told you that you seem naturally standoffish and you have no idea why? In this episode, I'm breaking down the subtle habits and body language isms that we do that we may not even realize that we do that shape how people perceive us. Now, by understanding these behaviors, you'll learn how to show up with more confidence, clarity, and authenticity. And if you want to build stronger relationships, earn more respect at work, or just stop second guessing how you're coming off, this episode is for you, and it'll give you the tools to shift your presence without changing who you are, because we want to keep that. That's important. I'll also share some small but effective changes that you can start making right away to adjust and correct those habits. And in the next episode, you'll want to stick around and hang out for that one, because I'll show you how to take it a step further so that you can own every room you walk into. So stay tuned for that. Hey there, I'm Melody Bose, your host of Jeans with the Blazer, a podcast about rewriting the rules of work and life. All right, everyone, as humans, we're hardwired to evaluate people we meet way before they even say a word. It's part of our survival instincts. Some people like to call it a gut feeling. And what's interesting is there's actual science behind it. Okay, for example, have you ever met someone and for whatever reason, they don't give you any reason to not trust them or not like them, but you just can't shake this feeling that just something is off and you just cannot trust them? And then maybe later you find out, you were right. All right, so there is something called the vagus nerve, and it connects your brain directly to several organs and is responsible for regulating things like heart, lungs, blood pressure, and interestingly, it also connects directly to the gastrointestinal tract, and some call it the brain of the stomach because it acts as a pathway for both sensory and motor functions, aka the gut feeling. So it's way more complex than that. I'm not even going to pretend to be able to describe it. But just know, chances are you're not crazy, and don't try to gaslight yourself into thinking that you're wrong, because your gut's usually right? Anyway, so we're processing a lot of data when we meet someone, and this formulates what's called the first impression. Okay, so unpopular opinion, I don't believe in first impressions, and I know that sounds like a complete step back to what I was just talking about with the gut feeling, but I genuinely believe that first impressions are just so much more than that gut feeling that we have. I believe it's also clouded by things like confirmation bias, and I don't believe that people are always representative of who they are when you first meet them, not necessarily because they're trying to deceive you, but there might be other stuff going on there. Maybe they have social anxiety and their body language is telling a different story than who they actually are. You don't know what kind of day they had or where they've just come from, so you never know. People are also trying to put on their best behavior, and sometimes they don't realize how they're coming off, so there's a lot mixing around in there. So I stand by it. First impressions are not accurate. You heard it here first. However, and this is a major however, sometimes first impressions are all we got. That's just how it is. So if someone is really good at first impressions, which yes, you can be good at first impressions, they can be better at presenting themselves to the world, and you could be, this is what's a bummer, because you could be the most qualified, the most kind, the most talented, most experienced person in the room, but if your delivery and how you show up doesn't match that, people never really see you. Here's the good news, though. It's not about being fake. It's not about performing or pretending or trying to be somebody that you're not. It's about being conscious of what you're communicating and what you're communicating without even realizing it, because your body language is your message, and that matters. Here's why. In work, it can affect whether you're taken seriously, whether someone wants to collaborate with you, or whether leadership sees you as someone who's ready, right? And in life, it can influence how people feel around you, how deeply they connect with you, and if they feel safe or inspired or energized by your presence, essentially. We all want to be accepted for who we really are, but sometimes our habits get in the way of that. And the wild part, a lot of them are completely unconscious. Okay, so let's get into the sneaky little habits that affect perception more than you even think. But first, before that, guys, if you are not on the Jeans with the Blazer newsletter, then I have some news for you. You need to get on there. So you should go do that right now. I'll put a link to it in the description for this episode, but it's jeanswiththeblazer.com/newsletter. All of the stuff that doesn't make it to the mic gets in that newsletter. I send it out once a week. We have fun. It's a good time. If you want to connect more, then join the newsletter and let's continue the conversation. Okay, so let's get into it. So we're going to focus on just a few key things, and we're starting with the default face. Okay, so everyone has a default face when they're at rest, but if yours tends to look upset or tense or unhappy, it can obviously impact how approachable you might seem. So we've all heard of the very affectionate nickname of RBF, or resting bee face. It describes a neutral expression that unintentionally appears angry, contemptuous, or upset. So one study that was done using face analysis software, it found that a typical neutral face shows about 3% of a hidden emotion, whereas people with RBF show about 6%, with most of that being subtle contempt, and that's from medium.com. So this matters because contempt, that's the universal expression for dislike or disdain, and people react to it negatively, and even if that's only perceived, right? So even if you don't intend it, it doesn't matter. You might be coming off and giving feelings of contempt and you don't even know it, and someone who's not your friend or doesn't know you like that, they can't reciprocate that. So how are you supposed to know? I got you. That's why we're here. So in workplace interactions, a persistently tense or severe facial expression can transmit stress to colleagues, and it can create an uncomfortable atmosphere for all of us. And we don't want anything to undermine those warm, cozy vibes that you have on the inside. Even if you're trying to present as not warm and cozy, but professional, we still want to be likable, right? Okay. So how to make your face seem friendlier? Even if you're perfectly happy inside, you might need to make a few adjustments so that your face isn't misread. So here are a few strategies. Releasing facial tension. Okay, so do we have RBF? Don't we have RBF? I don't know. We're going to find out. Start by checking in with yourself and taking a deep breath. And on your exhale, relax your forehead, relax your shoulders, relax your jaw. So this intentional breathing can help mitigate that stress that you might unintentionally release, and it might help create a calmer, more present look. So some executives report doing mini relaxation exercises like rubbing their temples, doing jaw stretch exercises, but there's one thing that you can do, and I'm not going to really do it now because I have makeup on, but you can press against your lightly against your eyeballs with your eyes closed, and that presses up against the nerve. I wonder if that's the vagus nerve. I don't know. I'm not going to have fake news, but it releases this tension that instantly calms you. Try it right now, unless you're driving. Don't do that. All right, next, practice a slight smile. So you don't need to be walking around with a big grin 24/7 unless that's your vibe and you want to. You do you. But if your natural resting mouth is the frowny face, then try just turning those up just a little bit when you're listening or walking around. Okay, so we focused on the jaw and what we're doing with our smile, and now we're going to focus a little bit on the eyes. We're going to get more into this because that's like a whole thing, the windows of the soul. But first we want to soften our eyes. So people often focus on eyes to judge mood, and if your neutral gaze is really intense, like Michelle Pfeiffer intense, then you might be giving off like Superman beams, and that might be really intimidating to some people. That can help you in some places. But if you're trying to come off as likable and inviting and approachable, then you want to relax that a little bit. So one trick that you can do is to look slightly upward when facing someone. This naturally widens your eyes a bit and kind of prevents that hostile squint that Tyra Banks like smizing. Okay, so a softer eye expression coupled with the occasionally friendly eye contact will make you seem far more approachable. All right, next we're going to zoom out just a little bit more with adopting an open expression. So certain micro expressions can make a big difference. For example, raising your eyebrows slightly when greeting someone. It's called the eyebrow flash, but it's a universal sign of recognition and friendliness. So you can do that, and you can also nod when someone's talking because that shows you're receptive, it shows interest. Smile when something's funny, nod when appropriate, and keep your resting features in a neutral or positive arrangement. So if you're unsure how you look like when you're doing all of this, practice in front of a mirror, record yourself. I know it's awkward, but the only way you're going to shift this perception or even know the perception that you give off is to be aware, right? So try it at home. Okay, now we're getting into eye contact because we kind of talked a little bit about the eyes, but we're going to focus on them a little bit more because they tell a whole story. So eye contact is easily one of the most powerful nonverbal communication signals, and how much or how little you give it can affect trust, it can affect rapport, authority, lots of things going on there. So the challenge here is finding the right balance, because too much can feel aggressive or odd, and too little can feel shifty or engaged. And one thing that's really important to remember is eye contact, and that sort of thing is variant depending on different cultures. So what I'm speaking to in this episode speaks mostly to Western cultures and how we perceive that body language. So to elaborate on that a little bit further, in Western cultures like the United States, maintaining eye contact is associated with honesty and confidence and attention. If someone is barely looking at you when they're talking to you, you have some questions like, what's going on? Like, what's going on with you? Is there something wrong with my face? Like, what's happening here? There's a lot of questions, and it takes away from the communication of the conversation. It also can be interpreted as a sign of lacking respect or even disinterest, and sometimes deception. So in the workplace, not making eye contact with someone who's speaking to you can really impact that trust, and your colleagues can feel like you're not listening to them. And consistent eye contact, on the other hand, helps you feel valued and heard. This is straight from entrepreneur.com. Okay, but there is another side of the coin to this. So you can absolutely overdo eye contact, and that sends just as bad and weird of a signal. So a cold, unblinking stare or a death gaze, that can really intimidate people if that's not what you're trying to do. You might be doing that. You might not even know. I don't know. But social norms tell us that staring at someone nonstop is like a little bit scary. Maybe you're feeling hunted, and that's no one likes that. Okay, so earlier I mentioned a soft gaze, and the big question is, how do you balance the right kind of eye contact? Well, that's a great question. Let's find out. So, communication coaches suggest maintaining eye contact for 50 to 70% of the time during a one-on-one conversation. So this means that you look at the person long enough to show that you're interested and you're engaged, but you occasionally break that gaze for a few seconds. So maybe they're talking and then you glance off to the side for a beat or two, and then you look back at them. So you have those kind of natural human movements. Okay, so quick story time that I have to share. With the eye gazing. Okay, so when I was taking my yoga teaching certification, one of the exercises that we did, a big part of that was kind of building on emotional IQ and being able to understand whenever someone walks into your studio, understand maybe what their vibe is so that you can show up for them and your class and give them what they need for what they came to your yoga class for. So it really took a lot of getting out of your shell. And one of the exercises that we did was eye gazing, where we were literally partnered with another person in our yoga teacher training. And we just had to stare into their eyes for 3 to 5 minutes. And I don't know if you've ever tried that before, but those 3 minutes felt like an eternity. Okay. And the big thing was that you weren't supposed to make any facial expressions. You just had to keep your expressions soft and neutral and just kind of like receive them and be open in that pathway. That's a really vulnerable feeling for a lot of people. And I remember when I did it, my partner, her name's Lisa, it was such a deep way to connect with someone who I didn't really know. And you exchange a lot of information just through eye contact. And in those 3 minutes, I feel like I saw her soul. Like it was this really powerful thing where when we really allow ourselves to be vulnerable and open, it creates that sense of bond and trust. And I remember her so uniquely than anyone else in my class. And she couldn't have been, more different than me just in her stage of life. And I felt so connected to her. So grab your partner, grab your BFF, grab someone who you know, and just try this eye gazing thing because it's wild. Okay. Just to practice, All right. Now we're going to zoom out a little bit more and talk about how you enter a room. Okay, so people form impressions of you within seconds of you walking into a room, and they can make split-second judgments whether you are confident or friendly or credible. In fact, one study by LinkedIn and Carnegie Mellon highlighted that within the first 7 seconds of meeting someone, people can decide whether you're a friend or whether you're not a friend. Do it next time that you meet someone and just notice what your perception of that other person is within those first few moments of meeting them. It's really fascinating how quickly you make a decision whether, I want that person on my team or maybe not. Okay, so entering into a room. The goal here is to project warmth and confidence. So imagine just, a colleague right now, just walking into a room and their shoulders are slumped over. Maybe they're kind of shuffling and they're, hey, how's it going? Da-da. Immediately just noticing them, that whole vibe of the room can change just simply by them walking in. And we don't realize just how much power and influence that we can have when we're aware of it. So then imagine a different colleague walking into a room, just shoulders up, eyes bright. Hi, how are you? Just being very genuinely open, normal volume of a voice and engaging with their room, right? That's a completely different vibe. You can feel it immediately. So in order to project that confidence and warmth, when you walk into a room, the first thing you want to do before you even walk in is walk in with a purpose, okay? You don't want to walk in and be unsure of where to go or who to talk to because that undecidedness can come off as nervous energy. Even if you don't really know where to sit in your mind, just pick somewhere and commit to it and go and sit down. Just make a choice and then just go for it. People can't see what you're thinking inside your brain. So when you make that commitment and that choice, they think, oh, this person, they know exactly where they're going and what they're doing. And you could have no idea. Okay, and another really important thing I want to note is body language researchers say that if you wait to decide what to do upon entering, you're more likely to exhibit nervous cues like pacing, rocking, or just like looking around. Okay, so it's almost like your body senses that you're not sure and then it reacts accordingly, right? So it starts here right between the ears and just kind of goes on from there. All right, so if you're not sure what to do with your face, there's something called the sweeping gaze technique. So instead of scanning the room frantically and trying to make a decision, right? Because before that, we've already made the decision of what we're going to do. We're going to use a sweeping gaze to project calm control. So start at one side of the room and just look across the other side as you enter. And don't make it obvious where you're bringing attention to yourself. Obviously, this works better in like a bigger, more crowded room or space. Because if everyone is sitting down in a conference room and you walk in and you just look, that's going to draw some attention to yourself. Don't do that. Know the room you're going to enter, I think is another big one I want to add in there. But basically, the steady gaze helps you kind of figure out your goal. So even if you don't know what you're doing when you walk in, decide that when you walk in, that you're going to decide what you're going to do. Okay, so you walk in the room, gaze around. Okay, I'm going to go there. And then off you go. So another thing that we can do is open and confident body language. So this is as simple as shoulders back, back straight, chin slightly tilted up. We want to have alignment from the top of your head down to your tailbone to the bottom of your heels, right? Almost imagine as if there was a string from the bottom of your feet to the top of your head and you pull it and that straightens you up immediately. So there is a psychologist called Amy Cuddy and she has really well-known research on something called power posing. And This suggests that certain body postures that we take can influence our entire mood and well-being. And honestly, I believe in it. For example, if you were to practice a pose like this, for those of you who are listening and not watching, I'm putting my hands behind my head and just kind of lifting my elbows up and just leaning back just a little bit. And so this elevates your shoulders, it elevates your posture, and it also gives you a little bit of a laid back feeling. But her research suggests that if you practice this for like 30 seconds to a minute or 2 minutes, it instantly raises your confidence. Try it right now. Try it for the next 3 minutes and then let me know how you feel. Okay, and then another thing you can do is acknowledge others immediately. So one of the quickest ways to seem friendly and confident is a simple greeting gesture, and that's right when you enter the room. So behavior analysts have shown that successful pitchers on the TV show Shark Tank signaled the moment they walked in by waving, nodding, or smiling at the panel. Okay, so these are people who are going and pitching their entrepreneur idea to Shark Tank, and those are the exact same things that they did. So consider that. Now, if you don't know someone in a room that you're walking into, you can start by asking a stranger a question. So this is a really great way to break the ice in a non-threatening way. And you can kind of see it as each question is a new stepping stone to ask a new question, right? So let me give you an example. So you walk into a networking event and you walk up to person one. Hi, do you know where the bar is? Person one points you in the direction of the bar. Thanks so much. By the way, my name's Mel. Okay, you get to the bar. Question two, you look at, someone sitting next to you or someone in line. Hey, so I have no idea what's good here. What are you drinking? Or like, what are you having? What do you suggest? You can even ask that to the bartender. Who cares? Ask someone who's also sitting adjacent to the bar area. Say, hey, can you pass me an extra napkin? You're just creating conversation. You're creating these moments where you can, one, introduce yourself if it's a networking event, or two, just kind of getting comfortable in that space, right? And you do that by asking questions because these questions are in such a non-threatening way that immediately people's guard is down. They don't think that you want something from them or that, you're trying to hurt them, especially in, a public setting and things like that. It's just a very non-committal and non-threatening way to interact. Okay, so I just talked about how to enter a physical room, but what if you work remote or hybrid or you're entering a Zoom meeting? I got you. Okay, so people can tell a lot about video, obviously, if you're watching this on a video platform. We're here now. But there's a study from Durham University that found on video calls, things like your facial expression and background can affect judgment and trustworthiness and competence. Okay, so facial expressions over webcam, and they're only, technology is only getting more advanced. It's only going to get more and more HD. These facial expressions can be just as impactful as the ones that you see in person. So treating a virtual meeting entrance with the same intention as walking into a in-person meeting, that has the same effect. So how do you do that on Zoom when you're logging on and trying to figure that out? Okay, so be on time and be ready. Logging in late just automatically doesn't set you up for any kind of success. Maybe you're fumbling with settings, and that can just kick things off on the wrong foot. Join promptly with your camera on if that's expected of you, and that makes you appear reliable and prepared. And just have your tech and lighting set up. Don't be fumbling around with your lights and backgrounds and stuff. Just be prepared by the time you know what time the meeting is going to happen. So just prepare accordingly. So another thing you want to do is smile and greet attendees. So this feels kind of awkward, right? Because we're not face to face in a room, we're on a Zoom meeting, but you can do the equivalent of smiling by waving at people when you walk in. I know it sounds dumb, but again, you're working with what you got, right? So you can't walk physically into a room. You're still going to own that space virtually, right? So turn your camera on, smile and wave. Another really great thing that this does is this compensates for handshakes, right? So in our Western culture, handshakes are a common form of greeting in the professional setting. So just by visually acknowledging everyone, you're giving everyone a handshake. The last thing I'm going to share about Zoom meetings is get your framing right. Okay, this seems like such a small thing, but it's so easy to just not even realize what you're doing. If you're on a Zoom call and your camera is tilted up, facing downward and, half of your face is cut off, or you're really, really close to the camera and you're not giving people a chance to see like what's in your background. That's really disorienting for people, especially when it's your turn to talk and people can see your background and your orientation. So people perceive that likability and that confidence just by you taking a step back and showing that upper body, right? It builds trust because it's in a normal environment, we can see what people's hands are doing. And again, it goes back to survival instincts. Not that anything is going to happen over Zoom. You can't harm someone physically, but still it builds that trust because people can see your hands and what you're doing with your gestures. And that helps build trust and likability. All right, moving on to micro moments and fidgeting. Okay, so our bodies are never completely still, and we all have these little micro movements, whether that's a tap of the hand or a playing with the hair. Nervous fidgeting behaviors can send the wrong signals in professional and social contexts. So I think it's pretty obvious, but fidgeting is a sign that we're not entirely at ease, and that can put others at ease, right? Another thing too that you might not even realize is fidget activity, but if you're checking your phone or your watch, that's another micro behavior with a loud message that says, I don't want to be here, I'm not interested, even if that's what you mean. Even if you're nervous and you just are checking your phone because you're checking your messages, you want to be aware of the space that you're in and the message that that's sending. So don't worry, the good news is that with a bit of self-awareness and practice, you can curb a lot of these habits. So you don't want to become a statue, okay? We're not here for that. It's just to replace unintentional fidgeting with intentional body language, and here are a few strategies that you can do. Okay, so first things first is building awareness of your fidgets. We want to practice a little mindfulness here, and remember, I've said in a previous episode, but mindfulness is paying attention to thoughts and emotions without judgment, okay? We're not judging ourselves here. This is simply an opportunity to collect data points about yourself, right? So take a note of every single time you fidget. If you're sitting still, and I have a hard time sitting still, I am a chronic fidgeter. I'm working on it. But one thing that I noticed is sometimes maybe a minute goes by, not even, maybe 30 seconds goes by, and I'm ready to fidget. But I'm starting to train myself to notice, okay, that's what I'm doing, so I can reel it in. Another thing is the placement of your arms. So if your arms are crossed, right, this can come off as closed off or defensive. So what do we do with our hands? If you're prone to fidgeting, you can clasp your hands, set them on the desk or your lap, and leave them there, right? You can also keep your hands purposefully occupied by, so let's say you are a fidgeter. Let's say you talk with your hands. Okay, use that to do hand gestures and underscore your points, like I am now. Another tactic, if you just absolutely cannot get away from fidgeting and you absolutely need to do something, have a stress ball or I know some people have like rubber bands around their wrists and they don't like snap it, but they can like feel the texture and it just keeps them from kind of moving their hands all around. Now, some of us are not hand fidgeters. Some of us are foot fidgeters. We're like shaking a leg around or tapping our foot. So plant your feet firmly on the ground to kind of ground yourself and be intentional about it. And this is that opportunity to use stillness as a power signal, right? So we're sitting still, we're aware of our actions. And as we're trying to do that, just imagine and think about what the most confident person in a room would look like. Are they playing with their hair? No. Are they drumming around? No. They look engaged but relaxed, and you don't see a whole lot of nervous movement from them. Now, if you feel the urge to fidget, something you can do is take a slow, deep breath. Breathing is amazing. It helps refresh the oxygen in your blood. It just kind of gives you a little mental reset, and it gives your brain a task for something to do. I also, when I used to teach in yoga studios, I would tell my students to count back from 4 because some people just can't sit still for even just a few seconds. It's normal. We have a lot of stimuli going on in our lives and our world around us. So by counting down, if it's from 4, if it's from 10, it gives your brain a job. It's not abnormal that we can't sit still, okay? But we can practice and teach ourselves to do that. And one way of doing that, by not letting the brain get distracted from the stimuli around us, is by giving it a job and counting. So inhale, count of 4, hold a count of 4, and exhale for a count of 4. That's called box breathing. Try it. It helps you calm down. All right, so all of you that are now body language experts, I want you to go out there. I want you to try it. I want you to walk into a room, don't even say a word, and I want you to own it. Let me know what you think, and let me know if you practice any of this and what you get from it. I would love to hear from you. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'll catch you next time. That's a wrap on this episode of Jeans with a Blazer. If today's conversation gave you something to think about, a mindset shift, or just the push you needed, do me a favor. Subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Leave a review wherever you enjoy your podcasts. It helps more people find it, and it keeps these conversations going. And I love hearing from you. Follow at Jeans with a Blazer and tag me with your biggest takeaways, your latest wins, or just tell me what topics you want to hear about next. See you next time.